The following podcast may be disturbing to those who support hatred, terrorism, anti-Semitism, and discrimination. Viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to How We Fought Against. We have a very special guest today, Brooke Goldstein, who's also the head of the Lawfare project situated in New York. But the Lawfare project is basically working internationally and has been doing amazing things for the Jewish people around the world. So it's my honor to introduce to you Brooke Goldstein. Hi, Brooke. Thanks so much for being here with us today.
Hi, Yifa. It's my honor to be with you. Thank you for having me.
So how many years have you been, since you've started the Lawfare project?
So the Lawfare project was founded in 2010. And at that time, it was more of a litigation think tank in the sense that we were studying this legal phenomenon called lawfare, which is the use of the law as a weapon of war. And we were studying how lawfare was being used against Western democracies and obviously against Israel and the United States to undermine the ability of those democracies to fight against terrorism on the asymmetric battlefield, but also to how lawfare was being used and frivolous lawsuits were being used to silence and punish those in the counterterrorism community who were exercising their right to free speech about these issues. And then over time, we were able to recruit over 400 lawyers, not only to study this issue, but also to apply their legal skills to file precedent-setting cases, not just on behalf of the Jewish community, but to enforce basic civil rights, like the right to free speech, for example, like the right to be free from discrimination targeting you because of your race or your religious or your ethnic or your cultural identity. So we have now, over the past 11 years, become, as far as I know, the world's only Jewish civil rights litigation fund. We have filed over 97 cases in 17 different jurisdictions around the world, like you said, and we're happy and proud to serve the Jewish community and other minority communities as well.
That's amazing. And I know because we've been talking a lot about this, and I think what you're doing now with specifically with the campaign to end Jew hatred, I think it's incredibly timely and important. And this is an attempt to kind of bring the conversation back to a sane place and make people have get people to have a better understanding of what we're dealing with and what the reality on the ground really is. So why don't you, you tell this better than I do. So what inspired you to come up with this new project?
So the Lawfare is a proud organizational partner with the new grassroots civil rights movement called End Jew Hatred. And I think why it came about is kind of obvious in the sense that what we're witnessing right now is an incredible shift in public perception of minority communities in the West, in particular in the United States. We're having a rise of Black Lives Matter, of LGBTQ movements, of new women's movements, excuse me, in the civil rights space. And Jewish people have always not only marched in those movements, but they've also been leaders in those movements and helped shape the policy. And it's gone back even as far as Rabbi Heschel and Martin Luther King marching together. The Jewish community has always been involved in civil rights, and yet there has never been a Jewish civil rights movement in this country. There has been Jews for Black Lives Matter, Jews marching for LGBTQ, but there's never been Jews for Jews. And what I mean by that is, yes, we've had the Zionist movement, which has obviously European roots and advocates for a national homeland and for us to exercise our sovereign right to, our civil right to self-sovereignty in our homeland. I'm talking about a civil rights movement where Jews advocate for themselves as a minority community in the United States, separate and apart from whatever's happening in Israel. Yeah, we're connected to it, but the civil rights of a Jewish student on campus, or the civil rights of a Jewish or an Israeli American in the workforce, has nothing to do with the foreign conflict. It is a completely different issue. So I think the time is ripe, and the partner organizations obviously agree that, you know, the time is now for Jews to march for themselves. The time is now for a Jewish civil rights movement. We are the oldest, most persecuted minority community in the world. Historically, we have achieved tremendous success, and yet that success is used against us. They deny that we are subjected to systemic Jew hatred and discrimination in both Eastern and Western cultures. So that's what this movement does. We show up to protest acts of Jew hatred and to demand consequences for it.
So, you know, what I find, I don't know, mind-boggling, for lack of a better word, is the fact that, you know, generally speaking, of course, but, you know, the Jewish community has, as you said, has been leaders in fighting for human rights, and has been leaders for, you know, standing up for other minorities and other human rights issues in the United States, in other countries around the world. And yet somehow 2021 is the 21st century, you know, the discourse on human rights is at its, I guess, historical peak. And the world looks back at Jews and says, and saying, you guys are the problem. You guys, you know, everything is now kind of turned back against the Jewish communities, against the Jewish state, against the individual Jew. And so how does that fit into your, you know, vision of this project?
So first of all, you touched on many things, and they're all correct. And I think, number one, on the one hand, we are suffering right now from what I think is a very dangerous amount of division in the diaspora Jewish community. And that's division along American partisan political lines. And a lot of progressive Jewish groups have fed that division, saying things like Trump is a Nazi, using cultural appropriation of Jewish pain and the uniqueness of Jewish history, and comparing it to a president of the United States, and then creating a rift where, you know, if you were a Jew who happens to have a different political opinion in the United States, no longer are we part of a unified Jewish community that can advocate for our own self-interest. I'll give you an example. When Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, by executive order of the Trump administration, was clarified, not even expanded, clarified to include the Jewish community, because it was such a hyper-partisan issue, some in the Jewish community were against the application of civil rights law to Jewish students, because they're so afraid to reaffirm their identity, and they're so afraid to agree with something that's right just because a president did it that they disagree with. Now, believe you me, if the Obama administration, or the Biden administration, which I disagree with on policy, had moved their embassy to Jerusalem, I would congratulate them. I'd be the first person to it. Jerusalem is so central to our identity as Jews, all right, that again, half of the Jewish community could not bring themselves to thank and to accept what was a historically monumental thing. So there's division along partisan lines that's extraordinarily dangerous, because Jew hatred is being used, and our community is being used as a partisan political football. When Arnold Schwarzenegger says storming the Capitol is Kristallnacht, that level of cultural appropriation really, I think, has its roots in bigotry, because you are denying the significance of the genocide against the Jews and what started. It's completely different than what happened on Capitol Hill. Number two, Jew hatred, even though it has morphed, obviously still remains the same. And you have this element of, well, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just anti-Zionist. And that's a political point of view, and we can, you know, engage in a political debate. The mistake that our community has made is to describe itself as pro-Israel, to center Jewish advocacy in the diaspora around a pro-Israel narrative. You legitimize, when someone comes up to a Jewish student on campus and says, hey, you Jew, I'm not going to include you unless you're against occupation. When someone gives a Jewish student a political litmus test based on their cultural identity to participate, okay, and you respond by, okay, let's debate the occupation, you are giving credence to the use of a foreign conflict as an affirmative defense to discriminate against Jewish people. Instead, the response should be centered around a civil rights narrative. You are attacking me because of my ethnic identity, and that is wrong. Just like you wouldn't go to a Chinese student, blame the Chinese student for China's COVID policy, project the crimes of a foreign country on them and exclude them, that would be racist. You don't go to a Muslim student and say, hey, you Muslim student, what's your policy on Iranian nuclear disarmament? Unless you agree with me, you're a racist baby killer or whatever, which is what they're calling Jewish students. That's racist. So when it comes to the Jewish advocacy, we have to recenter ourselves around redemption in the academic space, about calling out systemic Jew hatred in Western and Eastern culture. We have to be calling for the decolonization of Judaism and Zionism when others are trying to impose their definitions on our pain and on our civil rights, frankly. And so that, again, I think can be solved with a re-education of pride and even the creation of safe spaces for Jewish students and Jewish people to talk about their pain, to talk about the intergenerational trauma that we're suffering since the Holocaust, okay? To talk about the type of pain that creates someone like a Peter Beinart who wants to assert his identity by constantly advocating for the other. So those two things, the hyper-partisanship, we must unify around one call. And that, I think, is a simple one that we should all be able to agree on. End Jew hatred, wherever it is. I'll never forget, and I'll end with this because I know I'm being very long-winded, but I have a lot to say to you, Yifa.
That's great.
I will never forget an email that I got from a pro-Trump Jew who showed up at the protest against Jew hatred on campuses outside of the Grove and Beverly Hills, Jew hatred at USC. And he was wearing a pro-Trump hat. And he wrote me an email saying, in the past 4 years, I have not stood next to an anti-Trump Jew and chanted the same thing. And we both chanted end Jew hatred. That's the unity that we need right now to advocate for our own self-interest. And there's no shame in that. There's no shame in recentering and demanding equal protection for the Jewish community as a minority community in the West.
So that was my next question, because I know that you've been trying, and I agree with you fully. I mean, this should not be a partisan issue. This does not need to have anything to do with who the American president is, who the Israeli prime minister is, who the Israeli government is, and any other political issue around the world. It's a separate issue that we should all unite together to stand together against. And so how do you feel that's kind of working for you? Do you feel that people are coming together, and how would you describe that process?
General frustration with the way that the Jewish community has heretofore been organized, in the sense that when you look at successful 21st century mass mobilization movements, they are grassroots, they are bottom up, they're about decentralization and mobilizing and training at the local level. We had a situation, for example, where there was a rampant amount of Jew hatred in the California ethnic studies model. And a lot of Jewish organizations said, okay, we're going to take this on. And they did, and they worked really hard, and they scrubbed Jew hatred from it. At the end, though, and we still haven't seen the third curriculum, a letter is written in the form of an op-ed by the head of one of these organizations, I can't remember which one, saying, okay, Jewish community, that's enough. You don't need to protest. We fixed the ethnic studies curriculum. Don't worry, problem solved. People are like, well, wait a minute. You can declare a victory when it took 3 rounds to scrub Jew hatred from a California curriculum without recognizing the problem of systemic Jew hatred in academia in every single college campus right now in the United States, without recognizing the fact that foreign funding from groups like the Qatar Foundation International are funneling billions of dollars into ethnic studies departments that are indoctrinating against Jews, against America. Yeah, you might not have the word Jew in the curriculum anymore, but how about an investigation about how we got to here in the first place? This is a small victory, and for that I congratulate them for taking the Jew hatred out after the 3rd round of the curriculum. But we are nowhere near done, and it requires a level of grassroots mobilization by the public to give every single Jewish person a voice. You don't have to be on a board. You don't have to be the CEO of a federation or what have you to have a say and to have a voice. And that's what we can learn from other minority communities, this type of decentralized grassroots training and mobilization. And to your original question, Yifa, yes, it is working. We have held, oh my God, over the last 3 months, I think it's almost a dozen training seminars and webinars The strength of the movement is its partner organizations. The Lawfare Project has committed to providing pro bono counsel to the movement and to people affiliated with. We have amazing local organizations in Canada, all throughout the United States. Chapters are opening up in foreign countries as well. And we are providing the strategic, the financial, and the legal support for local communities to organize on their issues.
So let me kind of, if I understand you correctly, so if people are listening to this right now and they're wondering, like, they might not share some of your personal views or some of the views of the Lawfare Project on Israel-related issues. And so people might be concerned to say, well, we know Brooke Goldstein, and she stands up very strongly, for these issues. So is this initiative completely separated from that? Can you say to people, this is not about, the other things that I'm passionate about. This is a completely separate issue that should be uniting for everyone.
My Judaism is never separate from anything. It's one and the same of me and everything that I do. But the point is that I am not end Jew hatred. End Jew hatred is a true grassroots civil rights movement that I had a founding role in together with other organizational partners. And the way that it is organized actually is almost the same as the Black Lives Matter movement, in the sense that each organizational partner has buy-in and they can direct the central movement's mission. They can also apply to the movement for help for their own local missions. There is no approval process required by End Jew Hatred. It is an organization. It's an idea. It is a philosophy. Anyone who agrees to End Jew Hatred can join the movement and has a say. And that's what is happening. We're growing like crazy. I think we have, well over a dozen partner organizations right now. We have social media activists, influencers, and involved local community leaders, and it is what you make it. What End Jew Hatred does as a centralized movement, again, it's provide financial, strategic, legal, and other support for local communities to use the tools of 21st century grassroots mobilization to advocate for themselves as a minority community in the diaspora. There are people of all different political opinions involved, and End Jew Hatred's movement does not do anything to stifle that. That's the strength, is that all these people of different stripes can get together under the same banner. Exactly. And we must. Jewish community can't unify around this simple principle that we are a minority community, deserving of equal protection. No foreign conflict is going to change that. The projection of the alleged crimes of a foreign country on us to target us as a minority community is wrong, and we must fight it together. If we can't agree on that, all is lost. So
I agree with you. I agree with you completely. Now, I want to tell you that I was born and raised in Israel, and I've lived in Israel my entire life, and though, we have our issues with terrorism, and I don't have to tell you, I mean, there's a lot of challenges, to be an Israeli living in Israel, but I've never, ever experienced anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is something that, I've been dealing with for, all of my life, and I read about it and I know about it, and I'm an expert in the field, but I've never, ever, ever experienced anti-Semitism until I started traveling abroad. And when I started traveling abroad and different incidences has happened to me, even in the United States and in Europe and even in Thailand on the beach one time. And that was like the first time I was exposed to that someone can just lash out at you and say horrible things to you on the street, or just, meeting someone in a restaurant, or going to, for a class or just social events. And so that, I think that is appalling. I mean, just the fact that Jews today living in countries like the United States that have to suffer these type of attacks, I guess, so more and more so. So I do hope that people do now realize, wake up and realize that this is not a partisan issue, and this should not be something that, we're divided on, and we must be united, to fight this thing that is just growing and growing. It's
right, but also I want to recenter our advocacy, not just around fighting the other and defending against the crimes, the accusations of the other. I want to recenter Jewish advocacy around pride and around empowerment. Pride in our history, pride in our culture, and empowerment of the Jew as an individual and as a minority. And I think, that's what other social movements do. They provide a feel-good narrative. It feels good to advocate for yourself. But what we've been doing is telling students or people to post on Facebook 10 reasons why Israel's not an apartheid state. That's not cool. That's not sexy. You're going to get into a debate on your Facebook page. That's not what social media is for. It's funny, Yifa, I'm really glad you raised that, because you recall that we met on a street corner and you told me this story, and it was remarkable to me that you had never experienced anti-Semitism. And it made me realize, been thinking a lot about it since, that Israelis live in a bubble. They really live in this insulated bubble, and they need to understand the level of venom and hatred that is being targeted at this country because it is the Jewish state. And Carolyn Glick said it well.
It's not a bubble, Brooke. It's home.
It's home.
You don't get bullied inside your home. That's how I see it. Then you step outside and you're exposed.
There's an obsession. It's a sick obsession that the world has with Israel. And there's also an obsession that the Jewish community has. Some in the Jewish community say, well, if only Israel just behaved this way, there wouldn't be Jew hatred. And like, well, the state of Israel hasn't existed in its modern day way for that long. And I believe Jew hatred has a good couple 1,000-year history. And the two are not, intrinsically tied. And the cause and effect obviously is different. I mean, it's clearly just a modern form of Jew hatred. And so, we need to, like you said, just unify and recenter.
Yeah.
I do believe one of the most powerful things that I have done and I've been a part of are the End Jew Hatred safe spaces that we've created for Jewish students to express what it is like to be on campus right now, not training, just listening to them.
Mm-hmm.
And the confessions and confessional style of it and the sharing of pain in a group space has been so empowering and so eye-opening. And when you come out of these, you don't come out wanting to fight on the enemy's turf and argue in their paradigm about political conflict. You come out empowered to stand up for yourself and your culture and your religion, your ethnic identity, and what you believe in.
So you think that young kids or college students walk around, maybe even subconsciously, feeling ashamed of their identity? Is that where we're at?
So again, it's not a monolith. There's all different types of college students. What's undeniable is that there's a shame culture where Jewish students are being targeted because of their ethnic and cultural and religious identity, and foreign politics are used as an excuse. That there is a level of systemic Jew hatred in academia that should be worrying to anyone who is a student of history. And you can see, the results of it, and that we must do everything we can to empower the Jewish community on campus and elsewhere to mobilize effectively and to advocate for themselves as a minority community in this country.
So let me ask you something. We've said in the beginning that, Jews stood up for other minority groups for their efforts along the generations. Do you see that now? Is that one of your goals? And have you had any success with it, kind of harnessing or cooperating with other minority groups?
Yes, absolutely. We had the presence of other minority groups, not just at our protests and our rallies, but also within the End Jew Hatred movement, partner organizations. I think, but you hit the nail on the head when you say, the time not only is now for Jews to march for Jews, but the time is to demand that other minority communities show our cause the same loyalty that we've shown them. And the problem, however, is that there's a huge cancel culture and division, not just in our community. We're not the only minority community that suffers from division, but in other ones as well. I mean, even right now in the Black community, speaking to my friends who are advocating in that community, they're telling me there's a huge push against those who supported the ways of Martin Luther King, and those now who are calling for more radical measures. And there's a division and a split. And I think that our community, naturally aligns with those who call for peaceful measures and for, civil rights advocacy in the spirit of Martin Luther King, not in the spirit of any type of incitement to violence or further radicalization. So these are all, we exist as a Jewish community in the fabric of the community in America at large and the world at large. And those are definitely, as you said, different factors that are playing out right now. It's beyond, what is the term they use? Oh my God, I'm going blank. Intersectionality, it's beyond that. One of the good points, however, on that intersectionality topic is that what has impeded us from being able to connect with minority communities is the fact that we didn't share our narrative as a minority community. We are sharing a so-called pro-Israel narrative, which creates a binary, okay? If I'm pro-Israel, then somebody's anti-Israel, and I recognize that space exists. And if I'm an objective person coming into this debate, there shouldn't be a debate about my rights, by the way, but we've made it a debate. We've made it a binary. And now if I'm an objective person, I have to hear both sides and maybe I'll come out in the middle or talks on both your houses. So that's not what other minority communities do. They talk about their experiences as minorities in the United States. They talk about liberation here and now that applies to the community that they live in. So again, that recentering, I think, is absolutely crucial.
Yeah. So I was curious about, there is some discussion today on the use of the term anti-Semitism, and maybe we should not use it, and maybe we should use other terminology. And then, I saw that your choice, end Jew hatred, and I was curious about that. Was there any thinking process of whether to use anti-Semitism or to use a different term?
So I'd like to say that there was a more polling type of process, but there really wasn't. And I think that's the strength of it, because that's what this is. It's Jew hatred. I know it when I see it. I don't need to define it. I don't need to justify myself against you. I don't need your permission to feel it. Right? This is hatred against, period. The fact that anti-Semitism and the IHRA definition is now being debated and acted, these are all wonderful theoretical exercises, okay? But what we have in front of us and what we must unite to defeat is Jew hatred, plain and simple. There's no debate.
Great. So just to kind of, as a final question, I'm wondering, are you optimistic about the future? Are you, what do you see happening with this movement, or generally speaking, are you optimistic right now?
Totally. I do believe with all of my heart that we can end Jew hatred in this generation. I really do believe it, because I see the seismic shifts that are being created in the public perception of minority communities. Just 20 years ago, it was illegal to be gay. Okay. Now, if back against, same-sex bathrooms, that's politically incorrect. 5 years ago, what it was like to be a woman in the workforce was completely different. And I think that Jews as a minority community, as a community with a deep cultural identity and a beautiful, unique history, will be able to achieve that. And I'm not talking about dewiring the human race so that we all live in utopia and hatred is no longer present in human psyche. What I'm talking about is a shift in that Jew hatred will no longer be socially acceptable. It'll no longer be politically correct or allowed to express and to act with Jew hatred. And if you do, there will be societal consequences. That's what these movements do very well. They are direct actions and they impose consequences for bad behavior. If you look at the New Women's Movement, they pick a target, someone like a Harvey Weinstein who's engaged in terrible acts, and they make an example of that person and they take that target down. The Jewish community, unfortunately, we exist in what's called a very target-rich environment. I don't even remember who the Jew hater of the week was last week, and every day I'm getting an email about this BDS vote on campus or that person in Hollywood who did something that was, made a cultural appropriation that was inappropriate. I can't even remember. And we're running around like chickens with our head cut off. We need organization. Okay. We need focus. We need to be a part of a decentralized movement, however, with essential principle and organizing mission, which is to impose consequences for Jew hatred. I do believe this is attainable.
Oh, wow. Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, I don't believe that, Jew hatred will ever be over. Just like, there will be crazies in radicals. I don't know if the human race would ever, be fully healed from that. But if we can dial it back and bring it to a place like you've described it, that it's not legitimate anymore, that people on the street, people that are completely, normal, you would say, the people that I had spoken to, when they realized that I'm Israeli or that I'm Jewish, the type of poison that they've allowed themselves to spew at me is just crazy. It's unbelievable. So if we can bring it back to be a fringe thing to be ashamed about, as it should, then I think that we've achieved something amazing and incredibly important.
Well, really, if it all depends on us. I mean, what we're trying to achieve is that the Jewish community will no longer tolerate the type of targeted and discriminatory harassment that we have been a victim of because of systemic Jew hatred, systemic anti-Semitism in Western and Eastern cultures. We must say that we will not tolerate it anymore. That is the first step, is the recognition. Also the recognition of the trauma that we've inherited because of it and how that informs our actions, how we appease those and beg for forgiveness and try to impress those that hate us, okay? So we must heal ourselves as a community first. We must unite. We must engage in pride education, and then we have the ability to end Jew hatred in this generation.
So if the people at home listening, if they want to join you, and again, let's just emphasize, you don't have to be Jewish, you don't necessarily have to be American. Every single person with the decency to support this very simple, very fundamental human right to stop Jew hatred is welcome to join you. Just tell us how we can do that so everyone can run fast and do that.
It's very simple. I think that if you are interested in joining the movement or learning more about it, please go to endjewhatred.com and sign up and show up. Not sign up, stand up and show up. It's so important for the Jewish community to physically mobilize and stand up and show up on the streets and demand justice. And to that note, we have a protest coming up this March 7th against systemic Jew hatred in academia in California. We have an incredible speaker list. We have Sheila Nazarian, who is confirmed. We have David Suissa, who is confirmed. We have Joshua Washington from the Institute Black Solidarity with Israel. We have an incredible program lined up. Artists for Israel. They're going to be art installations, and it's really going to be an empowerment protest. So March 7th, please go to endjewhatred.com.
And social media, do you have any social media pages that they can visit?
I want to say it's probably the same.
And Jew hatred.
That's true. I should know that. I'm 40 people,
so amazing. So please go ahead and do that and share that with every single person that you know, Jews and non-Jews alike. Let's all stand together in solidarity. Brooke, thanks so much. Thank you for this initiative. Thank you for everything that you do. And thank you for coming here today and speaking to me.
Yifa, you were one of my favorite people. I'm your biggest fan, and congratulations on your new post in Washington, D.C. We're all very much looking forward to what you're able to accomplish.
Thank you, Brooke. Thank you. Speak to you soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Bye-bye.